Hello, everyone, and welcome to Worthy, a New Covenant podcast. It's your host, Mike Day, alongside our guest today, again, plural in this episode. We got the lovely Val and Angel Freeman. How are y'all doing today?
Good.
Good. Y'all are saying at the same time.
Yeah, I'm good.
So, Val's a little bit of a celebrity on this show, so she don't need any introduction. We have a new guest today, Angel. So, to start us off, we got some good things to talk about during this episode. Going to really focus on friendships and the way that God uses friendships and different friendships that were in the Bible. But to start us off, we just want to know a little bit about you, Angel. So why don't you just start off with what you do?
Okay. I am a registered nurse. I work for an insurance company called Sempra. I go in and out of the nursing homes and basically audit and check on patients that have Sempra insurance.
That have what kind of insurance?
Sempra Advantage. It's an HMO type of insurance, but we go in and manage, do extra visits on them, try and keep them out of the hospital, that kind of thing.
Okay. And we know that you have somewhat of a big involvement with New Covenant. So if you wouldn't mind, could you explain what that involvement is, kind of like what you do at New Covenant?
Well, anything that they ask me to do. No, okay. I teach Sunday school, and I help with backstage on Sunday mornings with the children's church. And then I also help orchestrate women's ministry.
Cool. Now, women's ministry, can you explain what that is, what y'all do, and just give us a little bit more detail on that?
So women's ministry is, it's basically the women of the church meet once a month, most of the months, and we just kind of get together and fellowship, eat, have good food, socialize. Sometimes we have somebody speak and tell us encouraging stories, or we just kind of love on each other, or I don't know, just anything that we want to do to just fellowship. It's just women coming together, building up women.
Cool. And now you go to women's ministry too, don't you?
When I can, yes.
When you can. Well, that's good. So really, we know that this episode is going to be about friendships. And we have Angel and Val on the episode today. And really, there's a reason for that. Because they have a great friendship. And inside the church and outside the church. And so we just want to know, how did y'all meet?
Well, we kind of grew up close to each other. Me and her sister kind of hung out most of the time. You were a little bit older.
Correct.
So, always knew each other. Kind of fast forward. The highlight of Angel in my life came when I went through a very difficult time. And with her background in nursing, it kind of just put us together. But she started attending New Covenant, way before, things like that happened with Scotty, my husband. And so, like I said, we kind of had that church relationship going on. And I think, for my reason for her was definitely being, coming to this church was definitely to help me in that season, along with just kind of like developing, that friendship inside the church, other than just knowing her pretty much my life. And like I said, she came into my life heavily in a very difficult time, which her name says it all. She is an angel.
That's too much. Yeah, we grew up close to each other, not far. Mm-hmm. I was a little bit older than you and my sister, just a little bit. A little wiser, maybe, I don't know. But yeah, started coming to church here. We never really hung out before. Right. And even at church when we first started coming. So my son started coming to church here because his girlfriend came to church here. And it kind of lured us here, which was a blessing that it kind of lured us here. Because I had never felt the presence of the Lord at a church until I came to this church, like I did.
That's good.
So, and we were very active in the other church before that, but I just felt like I needed to be with my son. And so we came and followed him. And Valerie was always here. Her and her husband were always here at church with their kids. And so would see Miss Valerie and, you know, and the different activities at church and around. But she's right. It wasn't until her husband got sick. And I am a fixer, and I am drawn to the broken and people who need healing. That is just who I am. And so there's something that just I felt off of Valerie. And so while her and Scotty were in the hospital, especially at East Alabama, because I went in and out of that hospital. At the time, my job was to be I was a care transition nurse. So I worked for a home health company, hospice company, and helped transition patients out of the hospital to home with services. And so I was in the hospital every day. And so it was easy for me to go by and check on her and Scotty and see what was going on and to just pop in and visit. And so it kind of started there, but then it kind of started really more after he did pass. And I needed her as much as I think she needed me. She needed me maybe for talks and encouragement, and I needed her for motivation. I have always had a hard time with my body image and how I felt about myself, and I just really was like, I wanted to improve my health. And we started walking. I'm talking in the winter. I'm talking in the dead winter. It would be 30 degrees outside, and we were walking and talking, and we would walk and talk. I mean, sometimes 2 hours, and just about life and about everything, and just about, I mean, anything and everything to help each other. And I mean, I learned so much about Valerie and who she was then, because I really didn't know Valerie until then. But yeah.
That's good. Yeah. My first, I don't know what the word would be. I guess introduction to you guys is at the gym. So that's definitely a connection. And it's weird how it's kind of funny that you said that about, and I didn't know that about your son bringing you to New Covenant. But it is interesting because God works things out like that, and you just never know what is going to happen. Because back in, I don't know what year it was or how many years ago it was, but I moved churches from my home church to a church that I had never been to before. There was no reason to go there. I literally just drove by and I saw it and I said, hey, I'm going to give it a shot. And then I fell in love with the church. This was back in Birmingham, by the way. It's not New Covenant. But I started going there, and then my dad said, you know what, I'm going to go with you. So my dad started going with me, and then he met his wife there. So it's just weird how it all works out. You know,
I mean, my son's not with that young lady anymore, but I mean, they were able to continue a friendship and still go to church together here. And, you know, my son still goes to church here. My daughter still goes to church here. And then, you know, I mean, we've been here. I was trying to count up how long we've been here. I think we started coming and going to church here when Dalton was 15 and he turned 24 this year. So,
oh, wow.
Yeah.
Time flies when you're having fun.
That's right. So to clarify one thing too, y'all were or were not friends before New Covenant?
Not, I wouldn't say close friends, no. Because there's an age gap there. There was an age gap there between us, and just not in the same circles. Past or definitely knew each other. Said, "Hey, how you doing?" kind of thing. But I was more closer to Shauna, right,
her sister,
right,
and so we had the same running circles that way.
What's a small town? I mean, you grew up in Dadeville, right, or no?
Yeah. Well, Jackson's Gap. We both were born. We lived in Jackson's Gap.
We Gap girls.
Yeah, Gap girls. That's right. We grew up in Jackson's Gap. So, but yeah, but you know how it is when you have kids and you're busy. I lived in Walnut Hill, which that's not very far, but I was down there, raising children and going to Opelika to work. I worked at East Alabama for years, drove to the hospital and worked. And then, you just didn't. My husband rodeoed some.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Different
Brandon
worlds.
rodeoed.
Yeah, he team roped some early in our marriage. And so we did some of that stuff. He even drove a dirt track car in our marriage. And so we did some of that stuff. And I don't think Valerie, I never saw her at the rodeos or the dirt track.
Oh, at one time.
And as our kids started school, you would see each other at football games, pep rallies, and different things like that. But
just kind of, like I said, we were just in two different worlds, and I've always kept my circle small anyway. That's what kind of person I am. I mean, I've learned to open myself up, but I've always played it safe. And so I guess you would say, I haven't always been a girl's girl. But that's just a safety net for me. I mean, it's not for any reason. I just don't like all the loud noise. I'm very careful to friendships.
Yeah.
I guess you would say.
Well, good. It's cool that, even out of you following your son to church, that you found a friendship in a time where God just works everything out. You really see his sovereignty and everything like that. I do want to read a scripture because it kind of just brings us right to a point where that she just said that, Angel was came in her life when she needed somebody the most, but then from that, it continued. So in Proverbs 17:17, the scripture says, "A friend loves at all times, and a brother is born for adversity." So it is neat that it can go both ways. You have friends sometimes that you kind of learn if they're your friend when things go south.
I think you have friends for different seasons.
Yeah.
And some come into your life at that later season of your life and bring something to you, because I've had some wonderful friends over the years, and I had some really good friends that I'm not as close with now. I mean, say hey, maybe text, maybe whatever, but used to hang out nonstop, cook out, kids growing up together, this and that, and now you barely talk to them or see them. If you pray for them, and if you know something's going on in their life, you reach out to them, but it's not like then God brings in a friend in that next season, and here you are.
Yeah, and it's interesting that the scripture, clearly states that friends in adversity, and God will bring you to a friendship, to carry you through a hard time, and it's interesting to see that play out between you two. So moving on to our next topic. We do see a lot of three or main friendships in the Bible, really, that we can kind of reference and see the truth in godly friendship, with Jonathan and David, and Ruth and Naomi, and Paul and Timothy. My personal favorite is Paul and Timothy. You really see it in the New Testament, and how the brotherhood between them two was so strong. So in y'all's opinion, what does biblical friendships mean to you? How does God use biblical friendships?
Okay, so to me, a biblical friendship would be somebody who's there for you, non-judgmental. Practicing the fruits of the Spirit, in a sense. They are truly that person for you. They have patience, they have kindness, they don't judge you, they encourage you. Even if you're doing something wrong, they correct you, but correct you the right way, with the right tone, the right words. And it's just like God gives them the ability to speak those things to you so that you can receive them. To where somebody that you may not have that kind of friendship with, you might not receive what they're saying.
Right.
So keep you on the right path.
That's right. Yeah. I think in a biblical friendship, like I said in mine and Mike's podcast, they feed you when you can't feed yourself, almost like in that fellowship mode. And, to me, that's so important because, like you said, encouragement and correction. And, if you're in that biblical state, correction is not going to be offensive. It's going to be, directed in the right way. And like you said, in a gentle manner, but it's going to be, you're going to take that in that biblical sense, in that biblical friendship. And I think, like I said, all in all, it's just, they feed you when you can't feed yourself. And that's such an important statement to me. I mean, I've always said that, and that's just highlights a friendship for me.
Yeah. And that's good. So normally I want to stop for a moment in the podcast. Normally Val does our news for the podcast. However, I'm just going to speak briefly on some things that are going on at the church. We got women's ministry at the end of this month. It's on Sundays, right? Sundays after church.
It's Sundays after church, but we're not doing it this month because we're going to help with the graduation breakfast for the seniors.
Okay. So where's that going to be located at? Here?
It's going to be here. It's going to be here at the church.
Oh, okay.
But it's going to be, yeah.
That's
yeah.
it.
So the ladies will just help with that breakfast instead of doing an actual meeting.
Okay. And then on that Monday, the Monday after that is going to be men's ministry. I'm pretty sure we're having that. And then June 1st is Kids Sunday. And that'll be where the kids lead the Sunday service, which will be a really neat experience. I think I did miss one thing. On that Saturday is Kids Fun Day. It's just a day, kind of like a vacation Bible school kind of deal on Saturday. Just one day. Just bring your kids. I'm not sure, Angel, do you know if there's like registration for that or?
There is here at the church. Just let Miss Jill know. And I don't know if it's from 8 to 12 or 9 to 12, but we're going to do breakfast for the kids, and they'll go around to different stations. Like I said, it'll be a vacation Bible school, like how it used to be, like the old school way, except for they're going to do it all in one day. And then at lunchtime, we'll dismiss after eating ice cream. So you're going to have ice cream and then leave.
All righty. That sounds good to me.
Yummy, yummy, good for the tummy.
That's right. Well, good. I'm glad Angel's here to carry me through this news. So let's get right back into the podcast, kind of finish this up a little bit. So I do want to scroll or flip to another scripture, 1 Thessalonians 5:11. I do want to read this scripture because it is about friendships as well, and it's a good one. The scripture says, "Therefore encourage one another and build one another up, just as you are doing." So really, one question I wanted to ask either one of you, really both of you, if you both want to answer, is, what are some good ways, there are obvious ways, but what are some good ways that y'all have found to, because sometimes we can be really centralized to ourselves, really focused on ourselves, but Jesus tells us not to be, okay? So what are ways that we can really care for one another over ourselves and really just be there for one another more than being all about us in a friendship?
Well, praying for each other, and then just texting words of encouragement here and there, especially if that person's on your mind, checking on them, seeing how their day's going, seeing if they need anything,
We're all time with each other, walking in dead winter together.
Yeah, that's right.
Even though you had to have like 5 jackets on, just things like that. And, that just really brought us like that much closer. It was definitely, the workout scene. And like she said, she encouraged me to show up at the gym and walk every day. And then I encouraged her, just kind of finding like, similar things to do. That definitely helps.
Yeah, it's really interesting because over some podcasts that we've done, again, thought, another analogy, y'all met over exercise and y'all encouraged each other with exercise. Say, hey, girl, you want to go to the gym tonight? And hey, girl, you want to go walk and run tonight? But in the same sense, we should be that way about church, though,
Absolutely. But like I said, let me correct you on one thing. There was no running.
Yeah, no running. None whatsoever.
Strictly walk.
Not running unless I'm being chased.
That's right.
Well, but seriously, like how we encourage each other, and a lot of people need that encouragement to go to the gym. They're not going to be self-motivated. And in the same sense, we can be that way to well, you just looked at me in a weird face. What you got to say?
I was going to say, I would have never done personal training and put myself through that if it wouldn't have been for Valerie saying, well, why don't we do this? And so, remember we started off, the two of us training at the same time and doing. And so it was tough. But I probably would have never even done that if it wouldn't have been. And I'm glad that I did, because it showed me, and then it made me really want to work harder at it. And I learned a lot. And so I'm appreciative that I did it. But I probably would have been too scared to just say, hey, I'm going to go do that,
And I'm totally opposite. I'm like, yes, we're going to go do that.
Yeah. So, so I needed that kind of person, because I'm sometimes like, no, I can't do that. Or I'm shy sometimes.
Right. Yeah. And that's good. And it's a really beautiful example of how, church friendship should really be. Hey, I'm going to see you on Sunday, right? And that gives you encouragement, because sometimes it can feel like, I've used this reference before, but, we're trying to row a boat with no water. Sometimes it's dry. It's hard to keep getting motivated to come to church, but it's important. We've also already talked about the importance of church And it's important to come, and it's important to have a friend to encourage you to come.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, talking about, kind of taking it back to the spiritual side of things and, the church relationship side of things. We've goofed around and talked about the gym and all that stuff. But, I mean, we've definitely helped each other in a Christian strength, I guess you would say, just like the gym. We've helped each other in the gym strength, and we've helped each other in the spiritual strength too. So it's all a workout.
Well, like I said, before we even became friends, and I was coming to church here, you sit in front of me, down on that side, and I always remembered I came from churches where you didn't raise your hand and you didn't move with the music, and it was very, and so being here was so freeing. And I hate to say it, but I mean, I watched you sometimes just in front of me, you would just cut loose and you would just give it, or you would go up front, and I always thought, God, I want to just be bold like that.
Oh.
So people do things for you and you don't realize. It's like I've told the kids in Sunday school, church is important to come to church. If you look around, sometimes it's the music, sometimes it's the sermon, sometimes it's all of it, sometimes it's the people that you see. I mean, I look at Mr. Jimmy coming in every Sunday, and I know it's a struggle to get here, but it's important because if it wasn't, he wouldn't make the effort to get here every Sunday.
Right.
And so just seeing him, I can glance around the room and see him in there, and I am just encouraged every Sunday that there he is.
That's good.
So
that is good. Well, look, we're going into the end of this podcast. I want to hit on some things that we're fixing to roll into. But before I kind of move on to what we're going to be talking about in this next chapter of Worthy and New Covenant podcast, I want to make sure y'all don't have anything else to say.
Well, like I said, I mean, there was like tons more that we could cover as far as friendship. I mean, there was like a lot of laughter, a lot of tears, a lot of more laughter, and she's definitely, I mean, I know, since life has happened, we kind of have not a distance, but, things, life goes on, and we still have that connection, and I'm very grateful for that. There's not a day that don't go by that you're not in my head, and I'm just like, I really need to reach out to her. But, like I said, we know I love you.
I love you, and we do get busy, but yeah, you're right. I pray for you daily.
And like I said, she's such an important, figure in my life, and she will always be that way.
I feel the same.
Yeah.
Because I needed what Val's got.
Right. And I needed with Angel. Season. Like I said, her name says it all. Like I said, she showed up. And I remember the first time that you walked in the hospital room, and then you left, and then a couple of days you came back and you brought us cotton candy grapes. Yeah, that won Scotty over. He was like donezo. I mean, because it was like candy to him, and like little things. And you've always been that person. And I wish I had such a heart that you have. And I see you have such a heart for people and their hurt. And I know we have special things that we as Christians cover that we specialize in. And I mean, I'll often look at you just like you looked at me, and just wish I had that heart for those people and, their times. And, but, mine obviously is in other places, and I'm okay with that. And I'm going to learn to like ride on that. But like I said, I love your heart.
Well, thank you. I love you.
Well, that's good, y'all. That's good. I'm just going to cry right now. Look, hey, it's really good to see a good Christian, godly friendship because God uses that in more powerful ways than we even know. It's really good. And one thing, just analyzing what they're talking about, if you notice, they're always putting the other person ahead of themselves. And that's really with any relationship that we have. We should really just consider them. Obviously, sometimes we need to be catered to and things in that nature, but it's about it's being selfless is being a good friend. But really, to end this episode is going to really introduce this next chapter of the podcast, and that's going to be solely focused on Jesus and his character, really going through Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John and their perspective of how they wrote about Jesus. And we're going to talk about John the Baptist. We're going to go through the book of Malachi. We're going to talk about Jesus in the very beginning in the Old Testament. We're going to talk about gospel foundations. And we're also going to talk about what we do with the gospel, taking a walk through early Acts, the early chapters of Acts. Me and Val's kind of hit on it a little bit, but we're going to go even deeper with that. So it's going to be an interesting season, if you will, or next chapter of the podcast. And so just be looking out for that, looking out for the next 10 episodes, not 10 seasons, 10 episodes. And we will see you guys in the next episode. Thank you, Angel, for coming along.
Thank you for having me.
It's been good.
I'll come back.
Absolutely. But it's been good. And if you listen every Monday, we'll see you next week.